Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest edition of USMNT Weekly. On this episode, we're looking at the declining influence of the Bundesliga on the national team. We're on Poch Watch, and we're making the case for some under-the-radar US stars. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today is your friend, it's my friend, Taylor Rocco. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have you listen to us talk about all things USMNT for once another week.
Once another week, indeed.
I combined some phrases there.
Yeah, you did. I had a wonderful time listening to those phrases, as I will have a wonderful time listening to your takes on the national team. And, of course, those of Joe Lowry. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Ryan. Are you in some sort of avant-garde art museum? What's happening behind you here?
I am, actually. I'm in Miami, which is an avant-garde art museum in its own right, I suppose, Joe.
Gianni's spare room. That's where you are.
That's right. I came to FIFA FQ just to shoot the S a little bit with Gianni Graham.
Nice.
That's what I'm here for. Yeah.
Is that what the 7-0 loss was? Performance art?
In a way. Elegant loss. Elegant loss is what we call that, Taylor. I'm in a hotel room. Apologies, listener, if my audio is less than a lower fidelity than usual. Tell you what, though, boys, this is the Book of Mormon in my hotel room here.
What a prop!
It's really different to the musical. They went in a very different direction in the musical. That's what I'm saying. I've been doing some light reading before I came.
Gianni's got some literature. Is the Salt Bay menu also in there?
Yeah,
I could have had 1,000 guesses for what Ryan was going to do next, and I never would have gotten there.
So surprising.
Yeah, you got to keep me entertained during this episode, or I'm going to start on Mosiah 13:8. That's where I'm up to.
Keep that for the Patreon.
Yeah, we'll do.
Also, I'm 0 for 2 so far because it was the Galaxy that lost 7-0. My apologies, David Beckham in Miami and Joe Lowry.
You don't need to apologize.
It was a moral 7-0 defeat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to be quiet for a while.
You made it worse, Taylor. You made it worse. I hope David Beckham doesn't listen. That's all I'm saying.
Don't worry.
All right, before we get to our USMNT Weekly, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you'll find our bonus content, bonus episodes, bonus video, and access to our Discord server where all the cool kids are hanging out. Coming to the bonus feed, we're going to be discussing a very important topic, one close to Graham's heart. It is the Book of Mormon, of course. No, we're going to be talking about the new USMNT kits. Home and away kits have dropped, Graham. Keep your powder dry for the old Patreon for this one.
I know, we've buried the leads. I was lobbying for this to Leeds USMNT Weekly on the main feed, but alas, we'll keep it for the Patreon, but we'll have more space to discuss what I think, maybe you guys disagree, we haven't spoken about this yet, I think are two pretty good kits from Nike. I don't know whether they've just worn me down by bad recent efforts, but I might be purchasing at least the away one. The away one is very nice.
Indeed. We'll get more on that on the bonus feed, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Do join us there, the best way to support us, please and thank you. All right, let's get to USMNT Weekly, shall we? We should start our attention, Taylor, if we can, in Germany. This season, we'll likely see the fewest Bundesliga minutes by American players in a decade. Joe Scally at Gladbach accounts for 45% of all minutes played among those Americans in Germany so far. Why is this happening, Taylor? Why do we have a declining American presence in the Bundesliga? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Let's talk about it.
It's a mixed thing, I would say, because I think it is the case. There are fewer minutes. I think that there are fewer, maybe like top-tier U.S. internationals playing in the Bundesliga. At the same time, I think if you remove injuries from the equation and if you remove some like mid-season transfers from the equation, or if you maybe give them another season to return, those numbers jump right back up. So it's sort of a mixed thing where I think there are some easily explainable aspects to this. At the same time, not too long ago, it felt like the Bundesliga was the league for Americans. Anytime an American was going abroad, there was an idea they should go to the Bundesliga first and develop with a German club. German clubs knew how to develop players and multifaceted players at that. So it did feel like there was a period in time in which that was the kind of focal point of development outside of the United States for American players. And I do not think it feels that way anymore. I think a lot of that has to do with to some extent injuries and downturns in form, but I think also to Americans basically being more expensive at this point.
Yeah, so the previous peaks, this was a Reddit post that showed that American players are set to receive the fewest minutes in a Bundesliga season for a decade. At present, it's sitting at around, there's no numbers on this chart actually, so I'm trying to, there's some numbers on the chart, I'm trying to deduct where it is sitting, but it looks like it's sitting at around 5,500 minutes in total. Previous peaks were in 16-17, which I presume is like the Pulisic peak, and then 1920 and 2021, which were maybe the Gio Reyna peaks, and that was when Americans were close to the 12,500 minute mark for minutes played in a full season. So this season it will be nowhere even close to that. Taylor, I think you're right. I think there's some bad luck or even just some like circumstantial stuff on an individual level. So Kevin Paredes has only played 2 games this season due to foot injury. So if he doesn't get that injury, he probably packs on another 1,000 minutes. James Sands probably would have done similar had he not got hurt so soon after joining on loan from NYCFC. He obviously went to St. Pauli. And then Leonard Maloney joined Mainz in January from Heidenheim, which was a step up. I remember we spoke about this at the time. A step up in terms of the team that he is joining, and Heidenheim are either going down or are going to go down. But he's playing a lot less. Then there's the Gio Reyna of it all, who is good enough to play regularly for a Bundesliga team, but is out of the picture for the most part at Dortmund, has been an unused sub in 8 of his last 9 games. So it's circumstantial. I also tried to put a number on just how many senior USMNT players are playing in each of the big 5 leagues. So we're looking at minutes here. The Bundesliga currently has 11. I make it. So you've got Gio Reyna, John Tolkien, Joe Scally, James Sands, not more than 11 minutes. Kevin Paredes, Leonard Maloney, Joel Emerson, who plays for Werder Bremen, 20-year-old US Youth International. Timothy Chandler, which was a blast from the past when I found that name. Cole Campbell, Noke Banks, and Paxton Aronson. Serie A, which I think there is this general idea that Serie A has supplanted the Bundesliga as the League of Americans, only has 5. So Pulisic, Weah, McKennie, Busio, and Musa. Now, there's a clear discrepancy between those groups of players that I've just read out, right, where you've got some key USMNT players playing in Serie A, and then in the Bundesliga it's kind of up-and-comers. But I think with some of those up-and-comers getting more game time next season, like Cole Campbell could get some more game time next season, Gio Reyna could stick around in the Bundesliga but move to a new team, Kevin Paredes will be back from injury, Noke Banks you hope will continue to play more games. You've also got Damien Downs coming up with Cologne. If he starts next season well, you better believe people are going to put his name forward into the World Cup discussion. So the point I'm trying to make is it wouldn't take a whole lot for that reputation to swing back. And if anything, I just feel like the Bundesliga contingent it's like a cycle too early for a lot of these players, whereas the Serie A players are at the peak of their powers.
Yeah, I don't really think a lot has changed here, to be honest. Yes, the minutes count has changed, but if we think about where these players were before, right, at the peak of USMNT players in the Bundesliga back in that 16-17 season, I don't think it has shifted all that much. There are 2 things, though, that I think have changed. The first is, and Timmy Chandler's name got mentioned, that 16-17 season was bolstered by a lot of German-born US-eligible players skewing the numbers. And that's not really what we're talking about here so much when we're talking about, are USMNT players getting enough minutes in major leagues, right? That's underpinning this whole conversation, right? Really, if Timmy Chandler and John Brooks are getting minutes in the Bundesliga, yes, that helps the United States men's national team. Fabian Johnson, another one. But that's not a repeatable thing for the rest of time, right? There's a real boost of dual nationals that can represent the United States and Germany of a certain generation. That's not going to continue necessarily in perpetuity, although we are still seeing that now. Leonard Maloney's name got mentioned as well. But there are fewer of those players now, and those players were the ones that skewed the numbers and really boosted them in the first place. The second thing is there are fewer U.S. players going to Germany and becoming stars. And that's not unique to Germany, by the way. The U.S. just has not produced players that have gone on to do what Christian Pulisic and Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie, who all went through the Bundesliga, have gone on to do. The U.S. has not produced players like that, but they're still sending players to Germany, right? You think about now, a bunch of them have already been named. There are still up-and-coming guys going from the United States to Germany, right? You think about John Tolkien recently. I mean, a bunch of names that have already been mentioned. In addition, Chris Richards, Noah Bank. I mean, we've talked about a bunch of these names. These are high-level U.S. prospects going straight to the Bundesliga. You've still got the occasional German-born U.S.-eligible player there, too. Nathaniel Brown's another one that falls into that category. Like, I, honestly, other than the level of player, I don't think much of anything has changed here. And I think the stat is completely skewed by Brooks, Timmy Chandler, Alfredo Morales is another one that would come up in this category. To me, I'm just not concerned about this at all.
I'm not concerned about it either, but I do think it represents an interesting shift, I think largely in the valuation of Americans. I think that is a key aspect of this, that you have, like earlier, you have the dual nationals, as Joe's already outlined. But you have Americans making those moves maybe around the same age, but for a cheaper price, or generally speaking, a cheaper average price. So I think there was an idea that in the Bundesliga, you can look to the United States, you can look to 17, 18, 19-year-old Americans, move them over. They're going to work hard. They're going to want to learn. They're going to be kind of moldable into what you need them to be. And you can do that for a much better price than you can in certain other leagues with certain other players. And I think looking at the transfer expenditure over time, it has increased. And in some cases, like with Ricardo Pepi, jumped considerably in a way that I think maybe doesn't present as much value anymore. So I do wonder if there's an element there of Americans have gotten a little bit more expensive, and maybe there isn't that return on investment or an return on like star breaking through investment at that. So there's maybe like just a fewer of those types of moves happening at present.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, Taylor, when I was talking about cycles, where you've got like the youngsters are still there in the Bundesliga that could very quickly change the perception of the Bundesliga isn't the league for Americans anymore. But you have the established players in Serie A, and what I was thinking of is like the lack of, or the relative lack of destinations in the Bundesliga for USMNT, established USMNT players if you're not good enough for Bayern Munich, right? So if you're Pulisic or a McKennie or Tyler Adams, where's the suitable destination for a tier 2 player? Like not someone who is one of the best players in Europe. It used to be clubs like Schalke and Hamburg, but they got relegated. Dortmund are maybe the obvious answer, but they tend to buy young. RB Leipzig tend to also buy young and have their own pipeline, which of course Tyler Adams was in, fortunately for him. But if you're not in that pipeline, maybe you're a little bit of an outsider. And the second tier clubs in Germany don't spend a lot of money. So if you're not coming through as a youngster, it is difficult to be funneled into these teams, whereas Serie A, on the other hand, has a load of clubs that feel like a suitable level for the level of player that the USMNT has at the moment. AC Milan, Juve, Napoli, Roma, Lazio. Also a lot of American ownership in that league, which seems to be a factor in pushing some of the transfer strategy towards Americans. I don't know how much of a factor that is, but I think it is something that there is a lot of American interest in that league at the moment. So it feels like the Bundesliga has been hollowed out in a sense, where a lot of those established USMNT players are now operating at, and so there's not a natural home for them to go in the Bundesliga, whereas if you look at Serie A, there's loads of clubs that make sense for them.
So Joe, let's talk about this. What is the best league for Americans at the moment? Is it still the Bundesliga? Is it Serie A? I mean, the Eredivisie has a shout for that. The Championship arguably could be in that conversation. Major League Soccer probably should be in that conversation as well. I suppose, Joe, it's a good thing that there's not a clearly defined answer to this, to have, the talent spread across multiple leagues, right?
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and reject the premise of the question. I think it's entirely dependent on the individual, right? Like if you're a generational US talent, like yeah, you probably don't want to go hang out in the Eredivisie for a decade, right? If you're a Malik Tillman, maybe PSV is the right level for you. I just don't think that exists, right? I don't think there is one destination that makes a ton of sense in all of this. I'm also just not quite sure that I'm like rowing along with exactly what's happening here as far as this trend existing or not existing. So I'm going to cede my time to either Graham or Taylor if they maybe have more thoughts on this whole thing.
I think the only thing I'll say, and I think this is still accurate, is that there are maybe harsher rules with Dutch clubs in terms of bringing through foreign youngsters and foreign players, and the like basically the amount you have to pay for them, the value they have to represent. And so I do think for Americans going to the Dutch league, there is a vested interest in, if a club is bringing you over, they are bringing you over to play you, and they do have a plan for you. But that also means that there are going to be fewer of them, because I think maybe there's less likelihood of them spending the higher amounts that might be needed. So I think in some ways it's the Dutch league, but I still lean the Bundesliga, with the caveat that, like, and this is a me thing more so than a league thing, this is the least interested I've been in a Bundesliga season in as long as I can remember. And I think a lot of that has to do with knowing that Leverkusen were never going to be able to repeat both the form and the drama of last season. The feeling that like there's going to be like a regression to the mean. I don't know who else is going to close that gap. In the end, nobody did. It feels like it's going to be Bayern winning it. And so I think at the end of the season, it will be maybe like Muller's goodbye. It'll be Harry Kane and Eric Dyer to some extent winning silverware. But I don't know how, like, if this is the most memorable of Bundesliga seasons for me. And I think that also has to do with Gio Reyna and Dortmund kind of struggling at times. Leipzig not really, like, doing much to elevate. A few other clubs along the way kind of having moments, but not really putting it together in a way that made us feel like there was a title race, like there was a ton to pay attention to. And so I wonder if that is also part of the cycle, that if we had maybe a couple Americans not getting hurt and a little bit more of a title race if I am then thinking like, no, the Bundesliga is still the best league in the world for Americans to play in and develop. Everyone should be going there.
Taylor, this might be my ignorance, and it very possibly is, but is the origin story of American players being in Germany the military installations in the US? And that's kind of where that growth started originally. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's certainly where you get a lot of dual nationals. And I think you also get probably early exposure to soccer when you have Americans there in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, still to this day. So I think you probably get some people, like if they don't, have children and create dual nationals, at the very least are exposed to soccer, go home, maybe play it more, maybe get into it more, and maybe you have the influence of it there. But yes, I think that is my correct understanding.
Yeah. So we just need some more Dutch military installations, and sort of that's the way we build this out. Is that right?
Yes, I'm sure that's what the Dutch want as well.
Quite sure. All right.
No, we need to do it in England. That's what's established. Bases all over England and Scotland. Who says no? Everyone? Well, tough luck.
Wow.
They're already here. Popeyes have sprung
now.
up all over Scotland in the last year or so.
Oh, I didn't realise Popeyes were military. Oh, that's cool. That's great. Glad to hear it. Soft power and hard power through Popeyes. I like that a lot. Very good. Let's take a quick break, shall we? When we come back, we're going to ask, what's Mauricio Pochettino up to? What's that guy doing? Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. Let's turn our attention to the national team coach, Mauricio Pochettino. Joe Lowry, it has come out in the past few days that Poch apparently hasn't communicated with Sergiño Dest in the 8 months that he has been with the national team. Dest was on Morning Footy on CBS saying that he's only been in touch with Pochettino's assistants since Poch took over. I think Doug McIntyre on Fox was saying that USMNT assistant Jesus Perez, his assistant, has gone and visited Dest. It's a difficult one to see what the situation is here, because maybe that's normal for a coach not to do that with a player who's not actively playing at this point. But then again, if Greg Berhalter didn't speak to one of his biggest players for 8 months, we might say, what you doing, Greg? What's going on here?
100%. Yeah, 100% correct. It's hard to know exactly how much of this is normal. One thing we do know is that national team coaches do communicate with players. Like, this stuff does happen. Greg Berhalter did it. It is not unique to him. Greg Berhalter, by the way, on the sidelines in Chicago's win over Atlanta over the weekend, not a behind-the-back pass, not a bounce pass, but a nice little tip pass to get the ball back in play quickly for Chicago. He's back in great form. Like the ball, he just kind of like bounced the ball off his hands to not,
tip with a P. Great. Sorry.
Yeah, nice. You don't want to have to hold it and really absorb it and then push it back. You just want to get it right back out there. Berhalter's in good form. Both Sebastian and Gregathan. As far as this story with Dest, it all seems a bit odd to me, right? I mean, I'm not Mauricio Pochettino. I feel like if I took over a job like this and have quite a bit of time on my hands, I'm probably going to call up all the players that I view as being key players and at least introduce myself and go ahead and have a short conversation and say, good luck. We're enjoying watching your games. Hope your injury rehab's going well. Whatever the situation is, it is a bit strange to me that hasn't happened yet. Do I think this is like a huge deal? No, not really. Like, Perez is Poch's right-hand man in a lot of ways. He's going and watching these guys play. He watched and had conversations with Tillman and with Pepe and with Richie Ledesma as well, and that's an interesting one because Ledesma is still kind of open for business depending on where he's going to go. So I don't think this is a huge problem. More than anything, I expect to see Sergiño Dest on the Gold Cup roster, right? That, at the end of the day, Dest is going to be playing for the U.S. this summer. He's probably going to get major minutes for the U.S. this summer, and he's going to talk with Poch then. So is this a bit odd? Yeah, to me it seems a bit odd, and it seems like there's precedent for having these kinds of conversations. Am I concerned about this? No, not really.
Do you think?
I have a question for the group. It's another one that I think I have an idea on this one, but do we think Pochettino as a manager is a guy who wants to build a harmonious squad where they're all kind of friends, or does he see it more as work? Because that's the famous Bielsa thing, right? Like, Bielsa doesn't go in the locker room. That's where the players go. I think he goes in maybe to give speeches, but maybe addresses them elsewhere. But there's a whole idea that the manager is separate from the players. And if Pochettino is a disciple of that philosophy and embraces it himself, that goes hand in hand with some of the quotes I saw from him about dual nationals, that we don't need to convince anyone. The player, if he's an American player, needs to be desperate. We want maybe less talent, but people who will come in and be desperate to defend that shirt and fight for the country. That's a bit dramatic and patriotic at the end for me. But I do wonder if it speaks to the idea that, like, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to coach you. You should want to work for me. I don't need to call you and check in on you. I don't need to see how you're doing. You need to show up to camp ready to play. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, the best data point I have on this, because I think I would have leaned towards what you're talking about there, Taylor, a little bit at the end. But Ben Wright over at Backyard had a piece where he sat down with Zach Steffen, who's been in multiple U.S. camps already, and Steffen was giving some perspective on Pochettino. And the quote is, here we go. He's very big on communication and very in tune to his emotional intelligence and other people's emotional well-being and everything. He communicates well to the players as a group and then individually communicates very well to the person to know exactly where they stand and what they need to do. Now, there's a lot of soccer stuff in there. I'm guessing that Steffen's talking about making sure they understand their individual responsibilities. But that emotional intelligence bit makes me think that Pochettino maybe is trying to be a bit more involved and like creating that more harmonious, we're all in this together kind of environment. And I wouldn't have really had any knowledge about this beforehand. So that quote is like maybe something to get to answer your question.
Yeah, it is. And not trying to nitpick, but trying to dig down deeper into that. But that still makes me wonder, like, is that with players who are in camp? Like, in camp, when he is with you as your coach, he's a very good communicator. He is very clear in his instructions and specific in what he needs. But once you leave, is he like, all right, see you next camp. I'll be watching your games, maybe. We'll see. Like, I don't know. And so I don't even know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I think it theoretically represents a shift in the way coaches have approached the national team, where I think there has always been much more of an emphasis on keeping tabs, making sure everybody's happy, making sure everybody feels valued. It feels a bit like college football in the old days of recruiting, when coaches were texting players, like high school players, like every single day to make sure that they're still good and make sure they're still on the radar. And that doesn't seem to be what Pochettino's vibe is going to be. I share Ryan's sentiment that if Berhalter didn't talk to his best player, he would have gotten a lot of criticism. I think if Berhalter weren't there trying to convince Richie Ledesma, he would have gotten a lot of criticism, and it would have been seen as, look, U.S. soccer's letting another dual national fall through the cracks and another Mexican-American at that fall through the cracks. And I don't see that criticism coming from Pochettino. I scratch my head at that a little bit, but then digging deeper, I wonder if there's a philosophical aspect of that.
I think Poch is what you kind of landed on there laterally, Taylor, where if you are not an immediate part of his team, you are not on his radar, because we know he likes to have a very small squad. That was his issue at Chelsea last season, where I think anyone would have found that squad too large and bloated. And obviously they had the dual dressing room set up, so Sergiño Dest is in the secondary dressing room for the USMNT at the moment. But I think he is that kind of manager. I think he's a manager who likes to have a close bond with his players. So I think if you are in the camp, you probably are getting quite a lot of communication from him. From everything that I've read about Pochettino, and recently was listening to Eric Dyer talking about Pochettino, how important he was for his career. And he obviously spoke very, very warmly about him. But where I'm surprised about this is, does anyone, including Pochettino, think that Sergiño Dest is not going to be a key player for this team in the immediate future? And he had the perfect opportunity recently to just call him and say hello, with Dest getting back on the pitch after a long injury, after a long time out. That would have been an easy 5-minute phone call just to say, congrats for getting back on the pitch, coming back from injury, we look forward to seeing you in the camp soon. And look, I'm not saying that call changes the World Cup for the US, or that makes like any kind of material difference, but it's people management, and that stuff seems to matter more in international soccer. When you have so long between camps, you don't get to speak to players every single day. It just feels a bit weird to me. And I know there's been the communication with his Perez, and he went out to the Netherlands. I was reading Doug McIntyre reporting in an article yesterday. So there's been some face-to-face interaction with US soccer. I just think it's a little bit weird that Poch himself hasn't even dropped him like a WhatsApp message or like a blue bubble message. I know you guys don't use WhatsApp, but I'm just a little bit surprised, given what I know about Poch, that hasn't happened.
Poch and Dest definitely use WhatsApp, just for the record.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think what's the situation here, Graham, we've created an awkward situation by this information coming out now, because when they do have their first interaction, it's going to be shadowed by the fact that they haven't spoken, and it's public knowledge now. But I think also a consideration of this is national team managers probably have a duty to leave their players alone a bit as well, because their domestic team managers don't want them set like Christian Pulisic doesn't want to be getting a "you up, bro" text in the middle of the night while he's trying to prepare for a game, that kind of thing, right?
You watched the film of Turkey yet? Hey, I gave you that whole slideshow. Come on, make it happen.
I call that the Taylor Rockwell, as I wake up in the morning and have a million messages from Taylor.
Graham, I think you sometimes forget that you're 5 hours ahead.
I think you forget Graham's 5 hours.
Yeah,
ahead, too.
that's what's happening.
Hey, mute your own messages then. That ain't on me. But also, I think I do still text at like 1 a.m. So whatever.
You do. I enjoy it. It's a nice way to wake up.
I mean, but at the same time though, like yes, club coaches probably don't want you being like, I don't agree with that tactic. Like I think there's a big amount of gray area between that and silence. And in that gray area could be like, hey, I love that run you made this weekend. I love that pass you made. I love that decision you made. And maybe the player responds with like, oh man, manager didn't like that one at all. And then that's a conversation you have about like, oh, why didn't he like it? Oh, that's it. Like, I think you can build those relationships that way. And again, maybe that's not his approach. Maybe he is doing that and it just doesn't get the coverage. There's a lot we just don't know. But it is a kind of revealing moment for the way that we expect things to go, the way we expect coaches, especially national team coaches, especially U.S. national team coaches, to keep tabs on the players and keep in touch with them and make sure that things are good, versus somebody coming in and maybe they don't have that same priority. They don't have that same focus on communication in that way. So it could create some drama because you're right, like maybe his core group loves him, but as we've seen, if two of that core group are injured for the World Cup, and if one of them is injured like last minute, is a guy who hasn't been talked to in a year suddenly the man who's going to start every single game, and does he respond accordingly? It is a bit of a kind of a colder relationship, I guess.
And let's just cut to the chase of what the ultimate question is here from this story, which is, and this might be a bit of a leap, I'm not saying I agree that this is the case, but is Pochettino fully committed to this job? Because that's the concern, is that this is a short-term special ops management job for a World Cup where we all expect him to leave after the end of the tournament. Is he committed to this as a project as much as he would be a club team? Are we getting the full sugar, full fat version of Mauricio Pochettino? Or is he kind of phoning this in? Not literally, because if he was phoning it in, he'd have spoken to Sergiño Dest at this point. I'm not saying I agree with that, but that is the ultimate question that this leads to, unfortunately.
Yep. He has never struck me as not an intense person, and yet with the U.S., a lot of his pressers, I mean, admittedly, in English, a second language, like, so maybe there's an aspect to that, but they're always very calm. They're always very like, oh, we shouldn't worry about results. We shouldn't be panicking. And I don't see some of that intensity I think we saw with Southampton and with Spurs, and that got him in trouble at PSG and Chelsea. And so maybe this is him trying something different. Maybe this is him being more mellow. Maybe this is what he is more often like, and we just don't get to see the calmer moments. But I do wonder if this is a sort of new thing for him that he is trying to approach in a different way, or just doing some things differently than he would have done in the past. And maybe that benefits him now. Maybe that benefits his next team he manages. But Graham, I think it's you are totally correct to point that out, because it is a thing that you kind of can't shake whenever you're having this conversation or delving into this topic.
I mean, Taylor, this probably is an adjustment for him as well. It's got to be a different pace of life, a different pace of career for him doing the national team thing. I suppose there might be some supposition here, but what do we think he actually does between camps? Because thinking about the England job, for example, when Thomas Tuchel goes to a game, it's a headline. He's on the match of the day footage. He doesn't go to a game every weekend, I don't think, but when he does, you know about it. Do we think that Pochettino is at a desk 9 to 5 watching game tape, analysing, or is he, I don't know, is he overemployed? Does he have a second job that we don't know about?
Again, it's like a valid concern and a valid question, because I can't think of a time, I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but I can't think of a time off the top of my head where he has said, like, oh yeah, I was watching tape of that guy this weekend. Oh, I watched his game this weekend. I think he clarified some statements after he initially was like, no, I haven't seen anything of that player yet. And then he had to come out and say, like, oh, I mean, we're always watching footage. We're always watching games. So I don't really know where the truth is in that one. I have not gotten the impression that he is going to games and super interested in watching every single MLS game and every single, I don't know, championship game to see how all of his players are doing. He has some level of staff for that. He probably has a Y Scout subscription for that as well. But it is, again, another sort of question that has to be asked, because we don't have a ton of clarity. He isn't traveling all over the world watching games. He isn't communicating with a ton of players on a daily basis. He isn't showing it up at MLS games, to my knowledge. So by
the way, I'll interject there.
Okay.
Yeah, he's been to an LAFC game. He's been to an Atlanta game. I'd imagine he's been to some others as well. I mean, there's really only a few things that national team coaches do between camps, right? They go to games, which we've already kind of talked about, and their staff goes to game as well. Goes to games as well. They meet with players, and that's sort of the whole bit that we're talking about here. And then they plan for camps and watch film for the future. Maybe you meet with some important people along the way, whether that's people inside your federation or other people involved in the game. That stuff certainly happens as well. We can say with certainty that Poch has been doing that stuff. How much of the communicating bit he's been doing, I don't know.
Do you guys know that like the Beckham quote? I think it was the Bruce Arena quote.
Elegance
about
and
Beckham
triumph.
Donovan. That one.
Be
yes.
honest.
No, the one that's been doing the rounds about. I think it was Bruce Arena telling him like David, like, this is Landon's Champions League. Like, this is like when Landon Donovan was being really mad at David Beckham for like not taking MLS seriously. You know that quote?
I do
I
now.
know that quote.
Okay.
Does it work with the World Cup though?
Well, so
this is the USA's World Cup.
I mean, kind of, I think, because I think for a lot of Americans, we've talked about this before, like they care about the USMNT more than they care about their club team. I think that is maybe not uniquely American, but it is a thing that always makes people, like, I think people are sometimes like confounded by how much Americans love their national team versus a club team. And I think, Graham, what you sort of like triggered or brought out in me is that concern that like I care about the U.S. more than I care about any other soccer team, and I want them to do really well. And I know that there are limitations there, but I always have a belief that they can perform, punch above their weight, pull a surprise, make something happen. And I think when you have a coach who also believes that, like, even if it's Jurgen Klinsmann, who isn't setting them out tactically, but is just instilling a belief that, like, yeah, that's the American identity, that's the American spirit, you can spring surprises. If you have a coach who's coming in, and I don't even think this is Poch, but it's the concern, right? If you have a coach who's coming in and saying, like, yeah, you guys aren't, like, come on, it's the U.S., like, you guys aren't going to win a World Cup, you don't have that much talent, but you're a very good team, it's fun, we'll see what happens. Like, there is that concern that there is not that same level of, I want this team to win no matter what. I am hopeful that they can scratch their way to a result, and I believe that they can. I think that is always the concern, especially when a manager is as well compensated as he is. There is maybe that lingering doubt of, like, is he here for the check and maybe some of the publicity, but also less spotlight, and then he can kind of move on to a bigger opportunity. And I don't think that's the case, but I think with the start they have had, and then some of these little moments along the way, it kind of keeps that kernel of doubt there, and I would much prefer if that kernel of doubt were thrown out the window.
Well, I suppose overall we have to trust that he knows as a professional what he's doing, and ultimately, Taylor, the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? The proof will be next summer. So, time will tell.
I mean, and even if it's, they lose in the first round, and that's kind of the expectation of the U.S. in most tournaments, or in most major tournaments like that. It's still about how they fight and how they play, and does he have unity? Does he have buy-in from the squad? Is it exciting? And so even if they end up kind of meeting expectations, if not exceeding them, I think that can still be a success for him if they're playing in a way that they have not been of late. So I don't even think it's like he has to elevate them necessarily. It's more about he has to kind of establish the level of expectation that we have come to expect.
Indeed. All right, let's take a quick break in which none of us will WhatsApp Sergiño Dest. When we come back, we've got a new segment, USMNT Show and Tell. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. It's time for USMNT Show and Tell. Each of my co-hosts is going to come up to the front of the class and tell everybody else about something they're interested in. Specifically, an under-discussed USMNT player. Taylor Rockwell's, he's itching to get up from under his desk and talk to the class. Taylor, what you got?
I used to hate this. I used to hate having to, well, I've brought today...
Did you, like, when you were little, you had to, like, show them, like, a little dinosaur or something, Graham? Is, like, what was the scenario here in your school in Scotland?
It was a vintage Barcelona shirt from the early 90s that would show...
All right, nothing's changed. That's nice to hear. I'm just shocked that Taylor is under his desk. That's just hardcore learning. Doesn't want to be distracted by anybody around him.
I was trying to describe...
As we all know, it's how you survive a nuclear blast, Joe.
Correct.
Did you have those desks where the desk and the chair were, like, one thing?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
I've
seen those.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to describe.
I don't think I ever did, actually. I think maybe in middle school. In elementary school, we had the desk with, like, the cubby underneath and then the chair that went with it.
I'm actually so old, Taylor, that my desks in my first school had an inkwell in them on the top.
No way.
Yes, mate.
No, that's not old. That's posh. Yeah, exactly. Now, did you have a specific ink refiller servant, or was that like one for the class? How did that
Be
work?
honest,
It wasn't a great school. The same guy who organised our pheasant shoot also did our Linkwell, so it was.
Graham, that was excellent. I just want you to know
Thank
that.
You, anyway, Taylor, let's talk about the player you'd like to bring to
I'm
the
enjoying
class.
this more. Yeah, I've got a random one, and it's someone that we've talked about at various points for a good long while. It's Charlie Kelman, the 23-year-old. I thought he was 30 at this point. American forward, who, when I brought him up yesterday after recording, Graham said, "Who are you talking about?" And
yeah.
Graham has watched so much soccer and been subject to so many conversations about Americans abroad. Maybe that was a sign that like Charlie Kelman might not be on like anyone in U.S. soccer's radar at present. Yeah, I think so. But I think he's still a very interesting player. Again, he is still only 23 years old, but has been a professional for 7 years or so at this point. A lot of them in the lower levels of England. He is still, I believe, technically a QPR player who won the championship, but he's been out on loan for most of his time there, including
5 loan
this season.
spells
There you
in
go.
4 years.
Twice with Leyton Orient, with whom he is presently loaned, and is the top goal scorer in League One this season. So he's had a good season, albeit in the third division in England, but it has led to some speculation that maybe he could feature for QPR next season, could maybe be made permanent with Leyton Orient, or could be a very good signing for Wrexham as they move up to the championship because he's an American. There's the American involvement. He would probably be available for a not huge amount of money and has kind of proven goal scoring ability, albeit at a lower level. But could he move up with them and be successful? It would be fascinating. He is only 5'6". He's got some kind of drawbacks physically. Yeah, I didn't know that one. That's what he lists as, at least. Who knows? Maybe he's 5'8". Let's go with 5'8". And just make it that way. That's how it works, right? But I think he, like from what I've seen of him this season, is a sort of opportunistic finisher. When a goalkeeper comes out and whiffs, he is happy to run right past that goalkeeper and pass the ball into the net. That did actually happen. But then he's also really good about keeping himself onside when a shot rebounds to him and making sure that he stays in good position. He does a really good job of getting on the end of crosses, despite that size that I mentioned. And then he will take people on, and he can score from distance. So he has some variety to the way he attacks. I don't think that puts him into U.S. soccer's or USMNT contention at all. But I think he's one who could be poised for a very interesting offseason.
Taylor, you mentioned he's good at keeping himself onside.
He's not the guy, is he?
He is the guy from last weekend in the League One playoff semi-finals. Leyton Orient, they had a 2-2 draw with Stockport. He scored both goals, did Kelman, but one of them has been labelled the worst decision in 15 years. He is like a good 5 yards offside when he scores the goal.
And was the goal allowed?
He was technically onside.
Well, and he wasn't offside, was he now?
Good point. Good point well made.
And maybe that's how he's good. Maybe he's also a wizard. Did I fail to mention that he's a wizard? Ryan has balloons going off in the background of his screen.
I don't know. Yeah,
that's how happy he is with Charlie Kelman.
So excited about Charlie Kelman.
Yeah.
I think when you complete a chapter in the Book of Mormon, you get balloons on the screen, apparently. I was just doing some light reading while you were talking about Charlie Kelman there. But yeah, he very much made headlines in the UK this past week, Taylor, for the wrong reasons, but not necessarily his own fault. More the officiating allowing that goal to go through. But
not the 2 goals in the playoff. You're not saying he made headlines for that?
We did, but one of them was controversial.
I see.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is a lot of hating from Ryan Bailey. I think out of jealousy. That's what I'm hearing.
No, not at all. Not at all. I like Leyton Orient, actually. Leyton Orient, their ground is one of the grounds where there's apartments where you can look over into the stadium. Same as AFC Wimbledon, actually. I don't know if you've seen that, Graham, but there's lots of apartment balconies that you can watch some lovely Orient soccer from East London.
For whatever reason, there is a little pocket of Stirling Albion fans that go and watch Leyton Orient games. I had no idea why. That and Sunderland. Sunderland makes more sense because Sunderland is SAFC, Stirling Albion Football Club, but for whatever reason, Leyton Orient are lumped into that little contingent. So I've always wanted to go to a Leyton Orient game, but haven't been yet.
Just getting a new apartment. Problem solved.
That's what I should do, Joe.
I believe they play today in that second leg, so by the time most people have listened to this, we will know whether or not they are still in contention to go up automatically. But that is, or not automatically, but through the playoff. But that is the other aspect of this one, that he could well be in the championship, or Leyton Orient could be, and then do they make that deal permanent so he's in the championship anyway? But either way, it feels like a decent chance he is playing at a higher level next season.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much, Taylor, for show and tell. That was a very good candidate. Joe Lowry, would you like to step up and talk to the class next?
I would love to. Taylor brought his pet rock for his. I'm just going to bring my own pet rock for this. Kevin Sullivan is my pick. Not exactly an under the radar player, but really someone who's not exactly in pure USMNT contention right now. He had his first ever senior start for the Philadelphia Union a week ago today, as we're recording on Wednesday. He started and played all 120 minutes of the Union's eventual penalty kick shootout win over Indy 11. That's the USL Championships, Indy 11. So still waiting for his first start against MLS competition in a real game. Kevin Sullivan started games in preseason. But this was the next step for him in his development. He'd made 3 substitute appearances this season. He'd had a handful last season as well after making his debut in the summer. And he looked pretty good in this game against Indy 11. He was not a dominant force for Philadelphia. Philadelphia, though, tactically don't really dominate games, even against lower-level sides. But he was aggressive and did not look out of place physically, which is maybe a place to start with someone who's 15 years old. They're not going to be operating most of the time at the same level physically as the grown men they're playing against. Sullivan is still smaller than everybody else on the field, but he is quicker than most of them, or was quicker than most of Indy's players in this game. There were a couple of moments, there's one in the 17th minute where he just has this great speed to win the ball and actually get to it before anybody else does, even though he's starting from a step or two behind everybody he's competing with. He's just so quick transitioning from defense to attack. But that's not the fun stuff for Kevin Sullivan. Like, Kevin Sullivan wants to be on the ball, and that's what makes him such a really promising player. He looks, and this is the best way I can describe it to loop other people in, he's like very Dempsey-esque in that he likes to try stuff. Like, you can see the ideas kind of popping in and out of his brain of, I should pull this one off, or I got to save this one for later. He pulls off a through ball in the 96th minute of this game that is quite nice over on the right side, playing as this right-sided attacking midfielder in Bradley Carnell's 4-2-2 shape. The thing with Sullivan that I thought was a negative in this match, he's super shot happy. Like to the point where it was starting to irritate some of his teammates in this game, maybe needing to dial that back slightly. But I'll take a guy who is confident enough to go out there and take those shots at a young age against players that everybody else on the field is noticeably older than he is and has had way more experience. I'll take a guy who's sort of irreverent in that way and wanting to have his opportunity than a guy who is too timid, because I think that player is not even playing in this game in the first place at 15 years old. That's the thing with Kevin Sullivan, is he's there because he believes he's good enough to be. And it turns out he is good enough to be. His confidence is off the charts. And I think you see that in this game. I think we're probably not terribly far away from a Kevin Sullivan regular season start as MLS games start coming thicker and faster. I think he was good in this game. He wasn't great in this game, but for a 15-year-old starting his first ever game against grown men, it's not a bad start.
I'm sure I read, I can't remember who reported this, but I'm sure I read that he's going to be training with Man City when they're over here for the Club World Cup, because obviously MLS is going to be taking a little bit of a break. He can't play, of course, because he's technically still a Philly player. But I'm sure I read, it might have been Romano actually that reported he's going to be training with Man City, which kind of tells you the potential that he has, that Man City have obviously done a deal for him already. That's been done for a while now, but they are keeping tabs on him to such an extent that during a major tournament they're inviting him in to train with the rest of their squad, which is exciting.
Yeah, a shorter, slightly less ruddy Kevin De Bruyne, I think, for them. Just like for like change, no problem, easy.
Yeah, sounds
No
about
pressure.
right. Do we expect, Joe, that he will become a full Manchester City player when he turns 18? That's the path, right? I mean, do we feel he's on the path?
It seems like he has the best chance to do that of any player who's made that move from MLS to Manchester City. Think about Jack Harrison, who was never really going to be a Man City player. Christian McFarland is over there right now training with Man City in their youth setup. He moved over from NYCFC. He's never going to be a Man City player. Like, Kevin Sullivan is the one that they think has the best chance to actually be a contributor at the senior level. So many things need to happen before then. The bar is super high, but everybody around Kevin Sullivan and Kevin Sullivan himself think that it is a possibility. Otherwise, City wouldn't have done this deal at his age. So, yeah, at least it seems possible in a way that it hasn't for someone like this before.
There we go. Class, everybody thank Joe for his show and tell. We've got one more member
Go
of the
back to
class.
crouching under my desk now, waiting for the bomb to drop.
Graham, what have you got to share with us?
So, I am going to dive deep into the memory hole for my show and tell. I am going back to the 2014 World Cup, a time prior to Klinsmann becoming the most vilified USMNT head coach until the next one. I am pulling a fully grown 29-year-old Julian Green out of my pocket, and I am plonking him on the table. He is currently a first-team starter for Greuther Fürth in the German second tier, has been for a number of years, actually. But, by all accounts, he has been their best player this season. He's going to win their Player of the Year award if he hasn't already. Now, Greuther Fürth are not a good team. They are closer to relegation than promotion. In the Zwei Bundesliga, is that right, Ryan? Is that how I pronounce it?
I would say Zweite Bundesliga. I'd also
Zweite
say
Bundesliga, right.
Greuther Fürth, if you want to.
Right, there we go. Just
that
you
too.
can edit. Who's editing? Are you editing, Ryan? You can just insert that every time I mispronounce
I'm not
these
gonna do
German
that.
names. So they are not a good team. So I don't know what that says about Green's level, but nonetheless, it's a decent league. I think the consensus is that it's been particularly strong this season with big clubs like Hamburg and Cologne getting their act together. And what I find most interesting about Green is the role that he's now playing as he has matured as a player. So when he first broke through, and he did get that call up, that slightly dubious call up to the 2014 World Cup, he was high up the pitch as a kind of orthodox attacking player, obviously scores in that tournament. Now, though, he seems to be playing as more of a deep-lying midfielder. A lot of the time, incidentally, alongside Maximilian Dietz for that team. But not really as a defensive midfield anchor. He's playing deep, but he is the pace setter in this team. His passing numbers are really good. His creative numbers are really impressive. He is usually the midfielder with the most touches in a game, but he is really prolific at making key passes and creating opportunities, and he's averaging more shots on goal this season than every other starting Greuther Fürth player. 2.3 shots per game. And he's their second top scorer with 7 goals. So the attacking instincts are still there. He's just using them in a deeper role, which is interesting. I'm not seriously putting forward Julian Green as a USMNT option here, but it is interesting to see a player of his profile, a deep-lying midfielder with creative ability and attacking threat who has lots of touches of the ball, when it seems like the USMNT are kind of lacking one of those players in the senior team. So if they could find a player like Julian Green operating at a higher level, because that's the thing, right, is would he be able to translate this to a higher level? I have my doubts, considering the team that he's playing for is a lower echelon team in the German second tier. But interesting nonetheless that after that false start for the USMNT and for Bayern Munich, he has forged a decent career for himself in a position that I didn't really see coming for him when he broke through.
Well done. Look at us, starting the episode with Bundesliga and closing it up there as well. Bookending, we call that, Graham. Wonderful stuff. I interviewed Julian Green back in about 2015 on Bayern Munich's US tour in the Ritz-Carlton in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was a lovely guy, actually. But, yeah, maybe not the prince that was promised back then.
Were you already in Charlotte at the time, or was that a sort of a harbinger of things to come?
I was there. Yeah, he was on my turf, Joe.
Nice, good. You got to set the conditions for the interview, like establish dominance early on.
That's the power. Yeah. That's the influence that Ryan has in the game.
I walked in
you
there
come
and
to
said,
me.
Yeah, I was like, I'm the silverback here, okay? You sit in that chair, which is slightly lower than
100 Julian Greens versus 1 Ryan Bailey. Who wins?
On that note, let's wrap up USMNT Weekly. Thank you very much indeed, listener, for joining us on this one. Taylor Rockwell, pleasure as always having you talk US with us, sir.
Pleasure was all mine, my friend. Thank you.
Joe Lowry, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Ryan.
And Graham Rutherford, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ryan.
Listener, thank you very much for joining us on this episode. We'll be back on the feed very shortly. Join us on the bonus feed, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, for our review of the latest USMNT kits. But for now, bye!